As we move closer to the NBA draft and the summer, I wanted to take a moment to dive into the Grizzlies' potential for this offseason and why this will be a make or break year for all involved with the team. This might be a long one, so get a drink, sit back, and let's get into this offseason guide for the Memphis Grizzlies. The Grizzlies' 2023-2024 season of historic injury numbers started before the year even began. Steven Adams, who blew out his knee diving for a loose ball last season. Brandon Clark, who tore his Achilles the year before, was also on the show before the first game even tipped. Combine this with Luke Kennard and Santi Aldama getting injured the morning of the first game of the year, and you're going to end up with a brutal season. The Memphis Grizzlies lost a combined 592 games last year due to injury, on top of the Ja Morant 25-game suspension. Everyone wants their team to break records, but not like this.
Not like this. Not like this.
At one point in the season, the Grizzlies played a game with 13 players on the injured list. Memphis's perceived starting five never even played together, and her new core four only played 6 games together. To say the Grizzlies were the walking wounded would be an understatement. The year obviously played out how you think it would, with the Grizzlies only winning 27 games, but to be fair, winning 27 games with this roster is next level impressive. Memphis went through injury after injury after injury and loss after loss. It was a difficult year to watch, to say the least. That doesn't mean that there weren't at least a few good moments. Usually when you lose 55 games in a season, you come out of it trapped in a deep depression. But there is a reason why last year will be considered a gap year and not the new norm. Believe it or not, there are actual positives from this lackluster season. The first bright spot has to be G.G. Jackson. Now, I don't like to toot my own horn, but I feel like I need to here. I was high on G.G. from the first game of his I watched in college, and I was always confused by his naysayers. When I watched G.G. play, I saw an 18-year-old in a large frame handle the ball in traffic with a bag already filled with tons of moves. Before the Grizzlies traded for Marcus Smart, I wanted them to take Jackson with their pick in the 20s. So when he fell to 45, I lost my mind. I don't know the potential of G.G., but I do know his skill and size mix are rare, and his improved mental status bodes well for his growth. G.G. broke records all year, and that led him to earning a spot on the all-rookie second team. The team's ceiling might very well be tied to G.G. Jackson going forward. The next bright spot has to be Vince Williams Jr., a second-round pick from the previous year. For whatever reason, Vince was buried on the bench behind players that he would later take victory laps on so many times that fans started to question if Taylor Jenkins understood how to evaluate talent correctly. It was only after the Grizzlies were forced to play Vince due to sheer amount of injuries did we see his value. To say that Vince Williams was outplaying all of the wings for the Grizz, except for Desmond Bane, would not be enough. In the month of January, when Vince was firmly pushed into the rotation, he averaged 15 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, over 3 assists, 1.2 steals, 0.7 blocks, and shot a blistering 47% from 3. On a 30-for-64 clip. Vince also earned a spot in the Rising Stars game, but unfortunately was shut down for the year not long after that. Vince provides a good mix of offensive traits combined with a defensive motor, much like ex-Grizzlies Tony Allen or Dylan Brooks, and he now projects to be a key rotation piece for the foreseeable future. Jaren Jackson Jr. was definitely a bright spot this season. Jaren played more than any of the other core players and was only shut down late to mitigate wear and tear. Triple J took a big leap forward on the offensive end as he boasted his best scoring average ever and was routinely used as the main point of attack all year. Jaren's progression as an on-ball scorer has been a long journey. Gone are the years of Jaren diving full speed into the lane and flailing to get off a shot. Jaren now attacks with an array of post and spin moves mixed with a much tighter handle, allowing him to get past most bigs in only a few moves. Jaren's 3-ball continues to leave much to be desired, as this very well could be the last skill needed to maximize his offensive potential. Triple J also continues to have rebounding issues, and while I don't think Jaren is a great or even good rebounder, the fact that Jaren wanders on defense to help others so often normally leaves him out of position to get boards. His low rebounding numbers are a bit misleading because of this. Jaren being asked to be the main guy for most of the year is going to pay off huge next year when he is surrounded by his all-star level running mates. The last bright spot can't be forgotten, and that's a top 10 pick. Theoretically, a team with this much talent should not have organically had access to a high lottery pick for years down the road. This new asset will give the front office many routes to go down to improve the team. Many will argue to just make a selection at 9 and swing for the fences. The Grizzlies have basically been given a mulligan after the poor selection of Zaire Williams at 10 just a few years ago. So this is a do-over, so to speak. You could also argue to trade the pick for a veteran big. With Gigi Jackson looking like found money in her possible wing of the future, why swing on another possible player that could stunt his growth going forward? Or this could also give them more fuel to trade up for a higher prospect player. Needless to say, the pick adds a lot of potential to possible avenues of growth. Looking at the current team construction, salaries, future assets lets us know just how much work the Grizzlies front office is in for this offseason. As it currently stands, the Grizzlies are over the first apron by a small margin, and this is even before they exercise their team option on Luke Kennard's $14 million salary. I think it's fair to assume the Grizzlies will look to bring back Lamar Stevens if the price is reasonable, as Lamar showed immediate value with his defensive versatility and slashing ability. The Grizzlies, as currently structured, will only have a little over $5 million for a mid-level exception, unless they get under the first apron, which is very doable. Unfortunately, there are only a few teams with flexibility this season to take on straight salary, even if it's a small contract. The Grizzlies could send Zaire Williams to a team like the Pistons, which cuts an immediate $6.1 million. Unfortunately, you might have to bribe a team with a low-end second-round pick to take on Zaire. Philadelphia is another team that will have massive salary flexibility and will need cheap but valuable players to fill out their roster. With this being a potential option to dump salary, I would send John Concher and his $6.1 million salary and ask for the 76ers pick at 41. These two moves are reasonable and put you firmly under the first apron, giving you the flexibility to make a larger trade to bring in a big salary, or use a team's full mid-level exception around $10 million or so. There's always hesitation with adding massive salaries with the fear that the player won't work out. But with the TV deal now done and inked, we know the cap will be raising 10% each year for the next 5 seasons. In just 3 years, a player at $20 million will only account for 10% of the team cap. This future flexibility means the Grizzlies can move assets around now to add a player of real value, even if the deal is in that $25 million range. Adding players is always easier said than done, but there are 3 main ways to add talent. There are 3 normal avenues that teams can go down to improve their club and build towards a championship. The first avenue is the draft. This is the most common way to add talent. Simply said, you're given draft picks, you perform talent evaluation on players, and then select that player you believe elevates your team the most. It sounds easy, but the draft has always been an inexact science with more misses than hits. If the draft is off the table, then the next most common avenue is free agency, which is a time frame in the offseason where players with expiring deals are now allowed to explore all of their options and pick the team that best suits them. This also seems straightforward. You meet with players and offer them money based on the value that you and your team have determined. But this too is full of miscalculations. Many teams overpay and get stuck on bad deals for players that never live up to the contract and most likely were never going to in the first place. This is common for smaller teams who have to overpay to get just average players over their big market rivals. Which leads us to our third avenue, which is the trickiest to do but has the highest rate of success. And that is making trades. Trading for players with good value that are already on long-term deals is the best way for small market teams to land stars. Yes, you can get lucky in the draft or find a hidden talent on the market and sign them to a small deal before their value goes up. But trading for players is the quickest way to get immediate return on your investment and land the exact player you need. With all that said, these are the 3 strategies the Grizzlies should approach this offseason as they look to retool and make a real run at a title. Even after a tumultuous and discouraging season, one could argue the Memphis Grizzlies are closer to making a title run today than they ever have been in the past. Yes, I'm talking about the same Memphis Grizzlies team that just went 27-55 and will be picking 9th in the upcoming NBA draft. The Ja Morant-led Memphis Grizzlies are coming off of the most historically injured season the league has ever seen, and somehow they still produce one of the league's best defenses. If any team had ever had the excuse to just lay down and die, it would have been the 2023-2024 Memphis Grizzlies. Despite the fact that Memphis routinely trotted out a G League team led by Jaren Jackson Jr., they were somehow competitive most of the year. Sure, there were the blowout losses, but there were also unexpected wins, led by players who were far from household name, even for the most diehard NBA fans. The competitiveness of this team has to be a credit to the coaching staff and the eye for talent in the front office. I say all this to simply say that this Grizzlies team might need to just simply run it back or apply what's called the plain Jane strategy. One could argue that the Grizzlies just need to stay the course, get healthy and improve internally. That, combined with the 9th and 39th picks, assuming the Grizz move off their last pick in the draft, Then adding a reasonably priced veteran big, you could argue might be good enough to contend now. There is some truth in this strategy. When you look at the Grizzlies roster, they look deep at nearly every position, bolstering multiple All-Stars, 2 former Defensive Player of the Years, one of the best 3-level scorers in the NBA, one of the best bench bigs in the league, and arguably the best 3-point shooter. And then you add 2 up-and-coming wings on great contracts. Adding to a core that strong, even at a basic level, could catapult them right back into a top-seed contention in the West and onto a short list of legitimate title contenders. So let's look at some possible paths that the Grizzlies could take to build on their current roster without having to make drastic changes. Let's start with the 9th pick in the NBA draft. This pick was an unexpected asset that the Grizzlies have to use to lock up their ability to contend, whether that's through a trade or taking a player at 9. In this strategy, let's just assume the Grizzlies hold strong and make the pick. And that pick is going to be a big, since that seems to be their most need. So here are the possible targets in the draft that make sense going off of the plain Jane model. A big to play next to Jaren is the obvious one and need to some degree. There is an argument to be made for Jaren to play the 5 and pair him with his multi-skilled power forward. However, Jaren has been very outspoken about playing the center position. So let's just assume the Grizzlies intend to pair a new center with Jaren, sliding him back to the 4. With this in mind, who can the Grizzlies target at number 9? Donovan Clingan is the obvious and most common answer. Donovan has a large frame, was heralded as the best defensive big in college, sets great screens, and shows real potential as a passer. It is a long shot at this point for Donovan to fall, with new reports saying that he'll most likely be taken in the top 3. With that in mind, who could potentially be on the board that's a good big in that range? Few names come to mind, but they all come with their own drawbacks. Zach Edey has been a name moving up boards, with a lot of Grizz fans slowly shifting to being okay with him being selected. Zach is actually larger than Donovan, coming in at 7'4". Edey has also been one of the most dominant bigs we've seen in college in recent memory. He scores at a high clip in the paint, rebounds well, and sets massive screens. Edey had a better than expected draft combine, but we still have years of film showing his limitations on defense. And with the NBA only becoming faster and requiring more of bigs to be able to defend on the perimeter, Edey could have limited in-game value in a short career because of this. Next on the list is Kyle Filipowski, an offensively skilled big out of Duke. Kyle is a 7-footer with dribble, shoot, and pass skills, which fits the Grizzlies' theme and model over the past couple years. Kyle moves well for his size, he scores well in the paint, added a 3-ball to his bag, and is a smart passer. However, Filipowski is an average defender at best, and only an average rebounder, and not a great rim protector. You could argue that Kyle might only be slightly better than Santi Aldama, but if you didn't want to pay Santi, then Kyle could be a good replacement. Kel'el Ware could be the next option on the list. Ware, on paper, should be a top 10 pick, based on stats, measurements, and athletic testing. But Ware has been labeled as a low motor guy, and it's a label that he has not been able to shake. Ware is the most athletic big in this draft, and he would pair well next to Ja on the break. He also is a real shooter from 3, a strong rebounder, a good weak side defender, just flashes a good passing connectivity. But using a pick this high on a guy who might not want to put in the work would be a real setback for a team that needs to add a rotation player for a deep playoff run now. Yves Missi and Tyler Smith are the last 2 options. Missi has great size with a massive wingspan. He runs the floor well and has next-level defensive instincts, but his offensive game needs a lot of work, and his main value would be as a rim runner and hiding in the dunker spots all game. Tyler brings the opposite skill set, as he is a long-range big who can really stroke it from 3. Tyler is also good at putting the ball on the floor and getting to his sweet spots. Smith adds very little on defense, and he's under 6'10", so pairing him with Jaren Jackson might not be the versatile fit that they want. But he can be a spread big if they move into a more 5-out style offense. If the Grizz are dead set on taking a big, and if we assume that Donovan is off the board at 9, then I would go with Zach Edey or Kel'el Ware. Edey at worst will give you a bruising big with a good scoring potential, tough screens, and more offensive rebounding. Ware at worst will be an athletic big with size and good scoring tools to bring off the bench to give the offense more options. But at best, if Ware hits his potential, him and Jaren would be one of the most dynamic big duos in the league. At pick 39, the Grizz should look to add versatility from a veteran player. If we look at possible options in that range, we come away with a short list of names. Dylan Jones, Jalen Bridges, Baylor Shireman, and Kevin McCullough Jr. Every player on this list is older and brings versatility in their game. Any of these players can come in from day one, play a role, and give the Grizz a strong 15 minutes a night. Let's assume the Grizzlies go with Baylor Shireman. Baylor has good size for a wing and can come in and immediately add a consistent 3-ball, which is desperately needed on this Grizzlies team. Baylor is great off the ball, a good connector piece, and a hard-working defender, but lacks good athleticism, so he will have limited upside. But if Baylor is able to come in and just do what he does, he'll be a really good piece for the Grizzlies. Moving into free agency, the Grizzlies are up against the first apron, so they can only use part of their mid-level exception unless they dump salary. But let's just assume that they want to go bargain hunting. Let's look at some reasonable veteran bigs that the Grizzlies could pursue. The first name everyone brings up is Andre Drummond, who's coming off of a strong year with the Bulls. Andre does the things you need. He runs the floor, he rebounds well, he blocks shots, and he scores in the dunker spots. But Drummond has issues as well. His awareness and general IQ is below average, as he consistently makes bonehead plays causing turnovers and dumb fouls. Andre also has no offense outside of the paint, and is a poor free throw shooter. But you could argue that Drummond's positives outweigh his negatives, and his overall skill raises the team just enough to reach the next tier. And the next possible big is Goga Bitadze, a strong post big coming off a solid backup role in Orlando. Goga has a lower ceiling than Drummond, but he will be cheaper and is younger. Bitadze is a good scorer in the paint and is not terrible at the free throw line, so he's usable late if need be. As a starter playing an average of 25 minutes per game, Goga averaged almost 10 points, 7 boards, and 2 blocks a game, which honestly might be good enough to raise his ceiling. Moritz Wagner is also a sensible name to throw in the mix. He has a team option at $8 million, but Orlando could decline to pick it up. Orlando is poised to make a big run at bigger names in the market, and that $8 million could be better spent elsewhere. Moritz is a 6'11" center with a tough mindset, good touch in the paint, and is a solid free throw shooter. Mo is not a great rebounder, but he would be a step above all the options that the Grizzlies were playing just last year. Let's assume that the Grizzlies land Mo Wagner, as Drummond gets bigger offer and the Magic go cheap and bring back Goga for a lower amount. Grizzlies might have to shed a deal or two in the process, and let's take that into consideration and say that they move off of John Conchar and his $6 million salary for a future second-round pick. Finally, we hope that the Grizzlies' main core comes back healthy and plays at least 70 games. This leaves them 12 games for minor issues and rest and needing to just be, monitored for wear and tear, but assumes that they play the bulk of the season. With all of this in mind, let's look at our finished roster heading into training camp. Trey and Scotty on 2A deals, this gives you a few other roster spots. I would bring back Lamar Stevens, and I feel like Jake LaRavia did enough to take Zaire Williams' spot, which gives you another dump option. This final roster shows a lot of potential on both ends of the court, with players able to play multiple spots. The strategy is boring and assumes good health, which has not been the Grizzlies' strong suit over the last few years. However, if healthy and with these reasonable moves in place, I can see this team winning 55 games, being a top 3 seed, and making a real run at the title next year. Playing it safe is a fair and reasonable strategy, but it is a little boring. Let's imagine the Grizzlies have decided to swing for the fences and create a short-term window to make a run at multiple championships over the next 3 seasons, which is obviously easier said than done. Finding a trade that moves the needle this much is tricky. The player in question has to fill an immediate role, their age needs to be in the timeline of your window, their contract needs to be actually attainable, and they need to actually be available for trade. With that said, I have 4 players that are legitimate needle movers and put the Grizzlies in real title contention. There has been 1 player on the shortlist for every Grizzlies fan, so let's just get that out of the way first. Mikal Bridges on paper looks like the perfect fit for the Memphis Grizzlies. He has great size, is a great defender, can play multiple positions, he has a great scoring package, and is in the same age as your core main 3. And his contract is very manageable currently. But why would the Nets trade a player with this much value? Well, Brooklyn is nowhere near close to a real playoff run, let alone contention. Brooklyn can get large amounts of assets for Bridges, who is set to be a free agent in just a few years. A deal that could make sense would have to involve a good deal of the Grizzlies' picks. In this trade, the Memphis Grizzlies receive Mikal Bridges, while the Nets land Luke Kennard, Santi Aldama, G.G. Jackson, the number 9 pick in this draft, a 2025 first rounder with some light protections, and a 2029 first rounder also with some light protections. This is a huge risk for Memphis. Landing Bridges would be a great get, but you lose a good amount of future assets, and a potential all-star in G.G. Jackson, who's already on a great contract, for only a short period of 2 years if Bridges decides to walk. The next player the Grizzlies could target that puts them into title contention would be Jarrett Allen of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Allen is a bit short for a center, but he plays much bigger than his size. He runs the floor well, is a dog on defense with his ability to play on and off the ball, is a consistent lob threat, and scores well in the lane. Allen has had issues closing games because of his poor free throw shooting, but that's an issue for another day. So why would the Cavs be looking to move off of Jarrett Allen? Well, Evan Mobley looks like they're big of the future, and that pair seems to be a little too limited on offense to work late in games together. This, coupled with the Cavs trying to force Jarrett Allen to play through a rib injury, has left both sides sour and ready for a divorce. A deal that could get Allen to Memphis could be Marcus Smart, the number 9 pick, and a top 10 protected pick in 2025. Marcus would give the Cavaliers a much-needed wing defender and a co-leader in the locker room. They also get an immediate top 10 pick and a future pick, both of which can be moved again for another big move to maybe bring in an even better piece. This lets Memphis slide Bane back to his natural spot at the 2, Jaren gets to slide back to the 4, and you can move GG or Vince Williams to the 3 spot. The risk is the Grizzlies losing out on a top-tier defender before ever getting to see how he actually fits with the full team. And they lose out on arguably their last chance to take a swing on a big draft prospect. Player number 3 is a new name on the trading block, but one that fits like a glove next to Triple J. Lauri Markkanen on the Utah Jazz will provide real outside scoring, as he might be one of the best big men playing from the wing. Lauri also plays defense, he rebounds, and is athletic enough to run with Ja Morant in transition and finish on the break. So why would the Jazz trade him away? Well, Lauri is in line for a monster contract extension, and the Jazz are not good enough to justify giving him such a large extension, especially if this same extension would limit them on how they can even build a team around him in the first place. I would propose the same deal I made for Bridges: Luke, Gigi, Santi, and 3 first-round picks. With the cap raising each year by 10% each of the next 5 years, a Lauri extension starting, let's say, at $40 million won't be backbreaking. But it does put all of your eggs into one basket. The Jazz get the same high-potential player in Gigi Jackson and a bag of picks to help get their roster where they need it to be. This is risky for the Grizzlies to invest so heavily in their starting 5, even with the cap raising. Management will have to be smart with rotation contracts and landing good second-round players. Our 4th player also comes from the Nets. Nick Claxton will be an unrestricted free agent and will likely look for a 4-year deal starting at $100 million. If the Nets are hesitant, the Grizzlies could come in and offer a good package to pair with Claxton next to Jaren. Why would the Nets make the trade? Well, Brooklyn could risk losing Nick Claxton for absolutely nothing in return. If negotiations were to break down and the Nets don't feel very comfortable offering over $25 million a year, well, this is where the Grizzlies could offer a trade package. Paying Nick $25 to $28 million a year is a lot. Because as I have said, with the cap going up, you will be able to work with this in just a few years. Claxton brings size, athletic ability, solid rebounding, and scores well at the rim. A package of Luke Kennard, John Conchar, Zaire Williams, the number 9 pick, a 2025 first-rounder, and maybe a second-rounder would be enough to get the deal done. We know that Claxton and Ja are cool, so Memphis is a team he would actually want to play for. But putting together a package that works will be tough. Of these 4 potential blockbuster moves, I'm leaning more towards the Jarrett Allen move. Lauri Markkanen will be too costly. Mikal is a great fit, but the assets needed might be too much to actually give up. And you might have to overpay too much for Nick Claxton. Adding Allen fills an immediate need, does not take too many assets, and there's a real chance that Vince Williams or Gigi Jackson could actually fill Marcus's role from a production standpoint. Big blockbuster deals are fun, but there's a reason why they rarely happen. Most teams look to make smart and calculated risks that have good potential with a risk factor that is not too detrimental if the move fails. Let's look at a few of these moves that the Grizzlies could make in our final offseason strategy. The third strategy the Grizzlies could implement this offseason is the calculated risk strategy. It's more or less a mixture of our first 2 strategies. In this approach, the hope is to make a pick in the first round of the upcoming draft and make a move for a solid player who will add good value to the rotation. The first move the Grizzlies could look into making would bring in a pair of vets. The Warriors are in a weird spot. They are in a win-now window with no real ability to compete and stacked with a few bad contracts. Andrew Wiggins and Kevon Looney both could be had for a fair price. Wiggins did have a down year, and his contract has 2 years left with a $30 million player option on the 3rd year. But, as we've already discussed, a $30 million hit in 3 years will not be as bad as it currently is. Wiggins only averaged 13 points per game last year, but in Memphis, he would only be asked to be the 4th option. Wiggins is a good rebounder, plays solid defense, and is a career 35% three-point shooter. Looney is a great rebounder, a smart post big who plays well in his role. He would provide much-needed leadership and basketball intelligence to the big man room. Triple J was routinely the only usable big last year, and Kevin Looney would bring in some much-needed help. But to get, you have to give. I would start with a package built around Marcus Smart, Luke Kennard, and maybe the pick at 58. The Warriors will be looking to cut money, and CP3 is on his way out. Smart comes in as a much-needed wing defender and can actually play with Curry, one of the best shooters in the league, while Luke Kennard is one of the best shooters in the league, and his services will always be in demand. The second move is to go after a wing who can fit a few different roles and will be available. Kyle Kuzma, no matter how you feel about him, is a very solid player. Kyle is a proven scorer from the wing, can play both forward positions, and is a solid defender who can slot next to Jaren. I would start with a package of John Conchar, Zaire Williams, Luke Kennard, and a pick swap of 9 for 26. Why would the Wizards do this? Well, this gives Washington more money that will fall off the books, a good cheap player in Conchar, and 2 picks in the top 10. This also allows the team to clear the way for the next wave of talent in Bilal Coulibaly, Deni Avdija, and these 2 top 10 picks. Now moving to 26 also gives the Grizzlies a new avenue to maybe land Zach Edey or maybe De'Ron Holmes, if we assume either could be an actual target. You could have to sweeten this deal a little bit with an extra pick, but I would start with what was pitched and then add on from there. Move 3 will bring in a veteran big who can slot right next to Jaren and do all the dirty work. With Atlanta jumping to 1 and most likely taking Alex Sarr, Clint Capella becomes a piece on the block. The Grizzlies will be suitors when the Hawks start floating his name out there for trades. Pella might be a one-trick pony, but damn it, it's a pretty nice trick. Clint is a defensive big who rebounds well, protects the rim, and is a good lob threat. But outside of that, Capella does not add much more value. Paired next to Jaren Jackson Jr., though, and you don't really need your center to do more than what Clint already brings to the table. A deal that might make sense to the Grizzlies could be Luke Kennard, Zaire Williams, and a 2025 first-round pick, maybe a second-rounder if need be. This sounds like a weaker offer, player value-wise, but I would guess that not too many teams are going to want to put a first-rounder in a deal for Clint Capella, who is 30 years old and only has 1 year left on his current contract. Move 4 is targeting a good big man who is younger than Capella but brings more versatility to the role. Wendell Carter has slowly become one of the best big man defenders in the NBA. He is also coming off of a season where he shot over 37% from 3. A simple trade of Luke Kennard, pick swapping 9 for number 18, and a protected future first-round pick should be enough to make this move happen. The Magic have a good bit of salary and can upgrade on the market at the position with a player like Nick Claxton or even Isaiah Hartenstein. But landing a top 10 pick, a future pick, and arguably the best shooter in the league is a very strong offer. However, this is a risky move for Memphis since Wendell Carter has been injury-prone most of his career, only playing an average of 57 games per season. But it would be a risk worth taking. There is no correct answer on which strategy is the best. All 3 have their pros and cons, and I assume the Grizzlies will attempt for the blockbuster move, but instead end up going with the calculated risk route. Let me know in the comments what your favorite move was, or your own personal trades, or even how dumb you think all of my moves are. I'm not an expert. I'm just a basketball junkie who loves talking about basketball. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. Be on the lookout for my mock draft 2.0, where I will be joined by someone much smarter than myself. Until next time.